Record. Perfect. All right, so hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Hani. I work for the EducationUSA Czech Republic, and today I have a special guest here with us. Her name is Rachel Drew. She, hello Rachel. She works as an English teaching assistant in Šumperk at high school over there, and she is in the Czech Republic with the Fulbright program. So she is staying with us for 1 whole year and doing a teaching job in Šumperk. So today our webinar is going to be about interviewing for US universities. And I'm going to do the introductions about what is Education USA. And then I'm going to pass it over to Rachel, who's going to share some experience and some knowledge about interviewing for US universities. So I hope that you can all hear us, and let us start with the presentation. Great, perfect. So I said that I'm working for Education USA Czech Republic, which is basically a network and organization that helps students who are in the 1st and 2nd year of high school. And I help them if they want to apply to an American university. So Rachel, you can actually click to, yeah, perfect, thank you. So if you are a student at high school in the Czech Republic and you are thinking about applying to an American university, feel free to reach out to me, because I'm here to provide information that are accurate, comprehensive, unbiased, and I'll be very happy to work with you and to help with your application to any university or college in the United States. There will be my email address at the end. I actually work in an advising center in Prague. And you know, if it's too far away from you, you can definitely visit our other advising centers that are in Ústí nad Labem, Plzeň, Brno, and Ostrava. And one is actually being open right now in Olomouc. So feel free to visit any of those, because in those advising centers, we offer multiple services for free. So what we usually focus on are seminars and webinars. Right now, a webinar like that, you know, about interviewing for US universities. We already did one about how to choose the right university or how to get finances for your US studies. And we are heading to have one about extracurricular activities and application pieces. So feel free to join our free webinars. We also have a fully stocked library. So if you do decide to apply to any American university, you can definitely borrow books on SAT or ACT testing for free from us. And we offer consultations. So you feel free to type your questions below the live stream, but you can also reach out to us throughout either social media under Education USA Czech, or right through my email address, which is advisor@fulbright.cz, or, you know, just contact us you know, via our website. Perfect, thank you. And let me pass it over to you, Rachel.
All right, so interviewing is one piece of your application. Some colleges choose not to, but the colleges that do really like the interviews, and often they play a pretty equal role in your application, in addition to all of the other things that you see on this little chart. So there are...
Sorry to jump in. I would just add that this is something totally different from what we are used to here in the Czech Republic. We never do interviews here. So as you can see from the holistic review of, you know, what does it look like, the application in the United States, the interview is just one part, you know, of the whole pie, as you can see. But we can definitely help you. And Rachel is going to talk about the details, because we are just not used to it in Czech universities. This is new to us.
Yeah, so there are sort of 4, I would say almost like stages of an interview, and they will ask you different kinds of questions. They don't typically tell you what stage you'll be in. They usually flow from one to the other, but it typically consists of a general introduction, which is made to make you feel a little more comfortable, a little calmer, and should be very the most casual part of the interview. Then usually they'll go into asking questions about you, and then into questions about the school. Personally, I think the about the school section is the one that most interviewers are most interested in and will probably require the most prep. And then they'll always end with questions that you can ask them. So I will go into what each stage sort of might look like, some sample questions, and how you can prepare for an interview. So first, like I said, we have a general information section, an introduction. And basically, like I said, they just want to ease you into it. They want to greet you. So it'll be very basic questions that you don't necessarily need to prepare for, but you might want to prepare a small 1 or 2 sentence answer to tell me something about you. I always found that that was really hard to answer because I never knew what to say, but just a simple like where you're from, what kind of high school you go to, and maybe 1 or 2 hobbies, things that you like to do. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, but for me, that kind of always tripped me up a little bit. I forgot that I would have to summarize myself. Mm-hmm. But that part's just very quick, usually about 2 minutes or less. The next part is more about you. So this interviewer will often already have your resume that you will send in. So a list of things you've done, things you're interested in. They will often know your test scores. And their goal is to get to know who you are off of paper. So it's really a chance for your personality to come through, but also for your passions to come through. And so often they will ask you specifically about maybe one experience on your resume. So for example, I can see that you have maybe this job on your resume. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? They might ask what you are looking to study at their school and why you want to study that specific thing. So it's always a good idea to think about the school, think about what particular program you are applying for, and then to figure out how to best convey why you want to do that, and maybe what in your past has led you to that specific field. Mm-hmm. So it's mostly about you. There are no right and wrong answers, but it is a chance for you to show who you are, because I think a lot of people are better at conveying themselves through speaking than they are through writing or through a very formal resume. So it is a chance to go a little bit more in depth on that.
So you mentioned that they're gonna actually read some information from my resume and then they'll ask, for further details. But can I throw in like something completely new about me that I didn't, kind of squeeze into the resume or to the motivational letter? Is this the chance where I just, show them a little more about myself?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, especially if you have something that's not on your resume or in your essays that is relevant to what you want to do. Great. So for example, if you want to study literature, and you might mention, my friends and I started a book club and we pick this kind of literature. It's a time to continue to talk about the things that you're passionate about. And it doesn't have to be only the things that they have already seen.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure the Czech students, sorry, this was my dishwasher. I'm sure that students, from the Czech Republic, they might be a little concerned about the English level. So do you think that it's very important to speak proper English and with no mistakes? Or is this like not, I know it's important, but is it the biggest deal?
No, definitely not. I think they're looking more for motivation and for passion than they are for precise grammar. Or even precise vocabulary. If you can figure out a way to describe something without necessarily knowing the word for it, they'll know what you mean. They'll figure it out, or they might even help you find the word.
Okay, great.
Going to a US university, you don't have to have perfect English. You do need to have a certain level so they know that you won't be miserable all the time, but you definitely don't have to be perfect. I know I have used imperfect English in interviews before, so it's definitely not a huge deal.
I also wanted to ask, like, is it one-on-one interview or are there more people involved?
Usually it is one-on-one, and it is typically either an alumni, so someone who has graduated from the university, or it is someone from the admissions office. So it's typically not a professor or a current student. You might end up with a panel, maybe, of a few people from the admissions office, or maybe one professor, but typically it is one person.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
So then the important one, in my opinion, is about the school. And this is something that you would need to prepare individually for each place you are interviewing for. Everything else, for the most part, could be the same, assuming that you are applying to the same major at every school. They want to know why you're picking their school. And that reason, theoretically, typically, is different for every school. And I think the two hardest questions that they will ask, and that I have been asked, one is just simply why? Why this school? They might ask it as plainly as that, or they might not. They might ask it in another way. And the second hardest question, I think, is what will you bring to the school? So you have to start thinking about what about this school makes you want to apply. It can be the specific department. It can be the location. It can be if you've looked up a class that they have that you really want to take, or a professor that teaches something specific that you want. My college had a service learning program that was the only one in the whole country. Could be something like that. Anything that makes this university stand out to you, you should let them know that this is really why you want to be at this school, and why this school cannot be replaced with another school.
Well, do you have any examples of how the answer should not look like? You know, what should you not say?
You should probably not say, well, I want to go to the US and this was the first school that popped up on Google. You can talk about what's the word I'm looking for? See, you don't need perfect English. You can talk about the reputation of the school, but often if it's a top tier school, they hear that a lot. So you should try to think more creatively. Think, especially places that maybe there's a bunch of schools in the same city. For example, I want to go to New York City. Well, there's 50 schools in New York City. Why, Pace and not NYU or something to that effect? So why is this school special?
Okay, great.
Yeah. And then the fun one, what will you bring to this school? You should think about qualities that you have, experiences, things that you want to get out of your time at the school, and what you will do to make that happen.
And where is that line between like telling them what I'm going to bring to that school and bragging? You know, where is that thin ice between those?
There is a line. I would say in an interview, as long as you don't come off arrogant, it's okay to brag a little bit. Like, be proud of yourself, be proud of your accomplishments. But I would shy away from words like, or statements like, well, I'm amazing. Well, who wouldn't want me? Well, I'm the best. You know, just that kind of thing I would shy away from. But for the most part, as long as you are proud of what you've done, they will, I think, receive it pretty well.
Great. What did you tell them when you did interviewing for schools?
That's a good question. This question I was very surprised by. No, I did not have a very good answer when they asked me. I mostly focused on, so I had two very different majors that I was applying to. So I focused on how combining them would bring fresh perspectives to both sides of it. So I did elementary education and biology, which are very different. I also talked about how I wanted to eventually go abroad. And so I talked about how I would bring some like international perspectives into my learning, as well as if I was applying somewhere that was very different from where I lived, for example, in the South. I talked about how I'd bring a Northerner perspective and, you know, bring the differences between the two. It's always good, especially coming from the Czech Republic, to talk about how you would bring new culture and share your culture and also learn about American culture and specifically the culture of the school.
Yeah, that's also one point that I wanted to ask about, like if you feel that it's important to tell them that you would later, after finishing that school, come actually back to the Czech Republic and like work in this field over here to make it better in the Czech Republic, or, you know, because sometimes students plan on maybe staying in the United States. So I just feel that it sounds a little better to tell them that you are planning on going back. What do you think about that?
I think you could honestly tell them both. I think they would be excited by both. I think it also sort of depends on the school. A lot of schools are now sort of integrating more international perspectives, and they encourage students to go study in another country or spend time in another country after they've graduated. So I think bringing a perspective that's different, and then also taking the gained perspective that you learn at that school with you wherever you go, whether that's within the US to maybe a different state or a different region, or back to the Czech Republic or even another European country.
Great, perfect.
Yeah. So this one, in my opinion, requires the most preparation. And I think it's most uncomfortable to talk about for me personally, because sometimes I don't know what to say, and sometimes I don't know how to brag about myself. But I think what will you bring to this school is a question that requires a small amount of bragging. So just know that they're asking for it and it's okay.
Yeah, I feel that this is really tough question, especially like, you know, when you do interviews in the Czech Republic for jobs, they always ask you about your strong sides, you know, for your like strong sides of you and the weakest ones. And, you know, for the weak one, you can definitely find something, but for the strong one, we are not just that used to boasting about ourselves. So it is a skill, but thank you for the tips that you told us, you know, what we can mention. That's great. Yeah.
And if you also feel uncomfortable with that, you could also focus on things that you would want to learn. So sort of going back to the previous one, but you can say something along the lines of, I'm really good at asking questions. And so with that skill, I will bring an eagerness to learn to the school, and, you know, along those lines. So it kind of goes around the bragging about yourself a little bit, makes it feel a little more comfortable.
No, but I agree 100% on the preparedness, you know, because especially if you interview for many schools or for multiple schools, you really should know like which interview is this one so that you don't mix it up and so forth. I'm not sure if that happened, you know, to you, but hopefully not.
It's definitely, you have to keep it very organized, and you have to know when each interview is. And yeah, I practiced many questions. If you Google college interview questions, you'll get huge lists. And I think I practiced maybe 50 or more questions, and I still got questions I wasn't prepared for. And that moment is just like, but the more you prepare, the more you're able to take answers from other questions you've practiced and piece it together. And
okay, great.
It's a little less stressful. And then the last part of an interview is usually questions. And so it flips it back to the interviewer where you get to ask questions of them. It does come off as optional, and it is sort of optional, but I have found that people who interview you are really impressed when you come prepared with good questions for them. Mm-hmm. It shows that you're really thinking about it, that you have specific questions for that university or for that person. And it just shows a level of care if you have questions ready for them. It's not required. You can always say, at this time I don't, but I will email you later if I think of any. But I just wrote a few sample questions, especially if it's someone who currently works at the school. Mm-hmm. You know, you can ask them, why this school? What makes you come back? What's your favorite part about this school? Mm-hmm. And often you'll gain some insight that maybe they haven't shared. And if it's an alumni who loves talking about their school, especially if you ask, you know, what was your favorite memory from this school? Mm-hmm. They will love to talk about it, love to share. Questions like, what are your expectations for incoming freshmen? Mm-hmm. They'll tell you things that they want to see mm-hmm. from their applicants. Mm-hmm. And for you, that's a good way to sort of gauge, okay, did I hit all these points? Mm-hmm. Like if they say, you know, someone who is open to new experiences, maybe you already talked about that, or mm-hmm. maybe you know it's in your essay. So you know if you are sort of a match for what they're expecting, or you can communicate further that you match kind of those expectations.
That's a great question, actually. Like you really just turned the, you know, yeah, that's cool. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I actually had 2 interviews on Monday, mm-hmm. and I asked this question at both interviews, and both times the interviewers said, wow, that's a really good question. I'm impressed.
That's cool. So, that's amazing.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
And often they aren't expecting it. So they kind of take a step back, and it's nice to feel a little like, yeah, I got the power this time.
Yeah.
I did it. That's a nice one though. I think a lot of people appreciate that question. And it also kind of gives you a gauge of like, yes, I fit what they want, or mm-hmm. I should present this a little bit more forward in mm-hmm. if I talk to someone next, or if I write another essay or something like that. Mm-hmm. Especially for alumni, this next question, if you could give incoming freshmen any piece of advice, what would it be? Mm-hmm. That is really good for someone who has been to the school before, mm-hmm. Because they know what life is like. They know they've lived through it. Mm-hmm. Sort of like, you know, if you could talk to your younger self, what would you say?
Yeah.
And then especially if it's someone who either studied your major or works in the specific school that your major is in, what does the typical day in the life of a something mm-hmm. major look like? Mm-hmm. And that'll also give you insights into, you know, how heavy the class loads are, mm-hmm. or if you're going into a science, maybe how many extra labs or discussion sections do you think you'll have? Is it typical for students to have jobs on campus? Things like that that are a little additional to what you would normally expect at each university. Mm-hmm. That question can really give you some good information. Or about clubs. There's not so common in Czech schools for there to be many clubs, mm-hmm. but at universities in the US, typically people are part of at least one, if not many more, clubs.
Which one you were part of?
Oh, I was a part of quite a few. I was part of a group called Appalachian Volunteers. Mm-hmm. So we prepared all year to take a trip during our spring break, mm-hmm. to a work site somewhere mm-hmm. in the Appalachian Mountain region. Mm-hmm. And we would either work on a community project or we would build houses with Habitat for Humanity.
Wow.
So I did that for a few years. Mm-hmm. I was also part of an organization called BCDM, which in the US, it's very popular. They're called dance marathons. Mm-hmm. And they're basically all night 24-hour events that raise money for a local children's hospital.
Wow.
So I was part of the group that prepared the event. So I actually created the event and did all the logistics for the event for 3 years. And then I mentioned before, I was part of a service learning program. Very unique. My school is the only school in the country to have had one for many years. And a lot of schools are now doing research on our project and how they can bring it to theirs.
Right.
But I was a student leader for that, and I oversaw about 30 to 40 students and 3 different community service sites for the students to go to. And then I also worked about 15-ish hours per week in one of the departments in my school. And what else did I do? I think
it was the work study, right? The work study opportunities on campus. Okay,
yes.
Great.
And if a little down the line to think about that, but definitely tell your professors if you have a work study. I got mine through my professor. So she knew I was looking, and she was able to give me the best. It's considered the best job on campus, the one that I had.
That's great. With that question, you can definitely learn more about, what the campus has to offer, what the school has to offer. So yes. This is a nice question for you. Yeah, that's amazing example.
Yeah, and like I said, it'll tell you more about other requirements that you might not be anticipating. So if I had asked, like I said, I was an elementary education major. So if I had asked, what does a day in the life look like? They would tell me that 1 day per week, I would be leaving campus and going and teaching at a school in the neighboring community. So I would find out that I would have some extra work on top of it. Or for my chemistry class, I would have a lab or a discussion section. So you find out a little bit more about what people typically do at the school and what opportunities there are for you.
Great. And you mentioned that you studied 2 majors. So my question is, could you introduce your school a little bit more, and maybe taking one of those questions, can you give us information about, what should the incoming freshman look like, and, who is a good person to apply to your school where you studied?
Yeah, sure. I'm trying to think which major is better to do it for. So my primary major was elementary education. So my school was called Boston College. And we in the university have four different schools that you can study in. So my school was the School of Education. And within that, there were 3 majors. I chose elementary education. And that is for anyone who is looking to teach. You leave with a license to teach grades 1 through 6. So that is 6 years old to 12 or 13, I believe. And the type of person that they would be looking for is someone who, is passionate. Why did you choose this school and this major out of, secondary education or something else that deals with kids, right? It's great to say I love kids, but why teaching, and why not something else to do with children? And you don't have to have necessarily any teaching experience to be considered a good candidate. It would just be someone who, like I said, just generally has the passion for it. Maybe you talk about your own schooling experience. And to be honest, you can talk negatively about your school experience and be considered a very good candidate. Often people who are the best teachers are people who didn't enjoy their teachers and their time in school, because it gives them a perspective of, well, I didn't like that. This is what I would do differently. And this is why. And this is why I think we need to evolve education. My education school in particular, I think, is a very forward-thinking and innovative school. And we had the first in the state bilingual education certificate to certify teachers to teach at dual language English-Spanish schools.
Okay.
So they're constantly looking to improve, and they're continuously looking forward to how we need to better our education system. So someone who aligns with that, who wants to make schools a more comfortable and a better place for students.
Sounds interesting. And one more question is about the like the timing of the interview. So I know like when are the deadlines for applications. So when we had that pie full of application pieces, when does the interview come into place?
So let me go back to the pie. Okay, so typically when you submit your Common App, your application that most schools will use, referred to as Common App, it includes your test scores. It includes essays and activities and recommendation letters and academics. These kind of all get lumped together in the Common App. After you submit the Common App, but before they give you a final decision, is when this interview will take place. So for most schools, unless you do an early action or early decision option, the applications are due January 1st. So it will most likely happen somewhere around February to March, I would say, because decisions come out in April and May 1st is decision day.
Exactly.
So typically April, they're choosing people. There's usually no more interviews. So typically March is the sweet spot. February might be on the earlier side.
Okay. And is it done like, especially with internationals, it's online, right? They schedule a call with you. Yeah. How was it done with you? Was it also online?
It was not. I actually ended up going to a coffee shop with, so the good part about many of these universities is that they have alumni everywhere. So you might be interviewing with an alumni who lives in the UK, who lives in Germany, who lives maybe even in the Czech Republic. They will most likely try to find you someone that is closer to your area. And that's for time zones. And that's also because they probably share more things in common with you if they live a little bit closer to you and will be able to understand more where you're coming from. Or they might set you up with a previous international student. So maybe someone who went to the school from another country. They might still be in the US. They might have gone back to their country or somewhere else. So I met in a coffee shop because the person they set me up with lived in the town over from me. So we were able to.
That's cool. And any tips for like, because like if it was me, I would be super nervous. So what are some tips to calm yourself down and don't come as a sweaty applicant, like shaking with fear?
I would say for the most part, unless you are frankly like a horrible person, the interview can't hurt you. It's not going to greatly damage you. Interviews are more often than not helpful. So like I said before with the arrogance thing, unless you come in saying, you need me, you know it, I'm amazing, that kind of thing, the interview is not going to hurt you. So just take a breath and know that you will stay exactly where you are as an applicant or be pushed even higher at the end of the interview.
That's very good to know. Yeah. Thank you, Rachel. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to type it underneath the live stream or, on the last slide of our presentation. There is our email address, and I can definitely refer you back to Rachel. This is actually my email address. So I hope that you got some useful tips and tricks. Rachel, again, thank you so much for sharing this information. I feel that it's amazing because myself, I haven't gone through interviews because I studied at Czech college, and I only spent 1 year at American college as an inter-university exchange, and they didn't require an interview. So I was very lucky, but I hope that those of you who are planning on applying to American college or university and you will get an interview, I hope that you get some tips from this presentation.
You're welcome. I will actually type
Mhm.
my email in here.
Sure.
In case anyone wants to contact me as well. It's my
Perfect.
email.
So it's Drew, Rachel Drew, so at Edison, but CC. Perfect. Rachel, thank you. And I hope that you enjoyed the webinar, and I hope to hear some of your questions, you know, either through the email or social media. Thank you and have a great day. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, let me stop the live stream.